Hello, this is Chen Chen. Welcome back to another episode of Chatting with Atelier. This month, I think we're going to talk about hand-dyed yarns because it is a common query. We get asked a lot about it. I think it's something that is getting the attention of a lot of yarn users internationally. I think big yarn shops, the big retailers, and are also starting to stock something called hand-dyed yarns. So I think a lot of people have questions about it, and we'll take this episode to kind of talk about it and how you can use it. So Hui Lim, maybe you can tell everybody what exactly are hand-dyed yarns.
Okay, so basically the yarns that you buy from most of the commercial manufacturers are not hand-dyed yarns because they are dyed by machine. There is precision in how they dye the yarn. So every time they make this particular blue color, for instance, it is always the same tone to the same extent, same amount. So it looks the same saturation. And so even though there's different lots, you can kind of pretty much match them. So I buy this same yarn 2 weeks ago, I go to the same shop and buy, it would look pretty much the same.
So those are commercial dyed yarns.
But with hand-dyed yarns, the hand dyer is the one who adds in the dye. And so how to add the dye, where to add the dye, in what kind of arrangement do you put the colors, it can be very precise, it can be very random, but it is not very highly replicable. So the hand dyer can't say that, okay, this skein looks like that, right? And then the next time I do it, I would get the exact same placement of where the blues are, where the reds are, and so on. So hand dyeing yarn gives very unique results almost every time.
So I think this is also why sometimes it's called indie dyers or indie dyed yarns, I guess. I think one of the things is, I think from what I get is that even hand-dyed yarns, you have a big range. Because you have hand dyers like Sweet Georgia, who they actually have dye formulas, they record. So they do get back the same shade of blue. It's just that, so what you're saying is that blue may not be placed in the exact same location because the next time I dye it, the skein may lie slightly differently than the previous one.
Yeah. So they might have records, like when I dye yarn, I will record and say, okay, this is how saturated my dye was, so I want to get this particular tone of a certain color. But how I place the colors on the yarn differs from time to time because you can't get as precise and say I will put 2 drops here and then 4 drops here. You know, there's no such a degree of precision.
So I guess the question is, maybe we can go on to talk about like what, because the next question I have is it possibly to commercially produce, like, manufacture hand-dyed yarns?
It's possible.
Scale lah, and is it possible for some particular types of hand-dyed yarns? Because I know hand-dyed yarns, they have what we call, the word, some that I come across is like, the words that I come across are like tonal, variegated, speckle, self-striping. I'm sure there's a lot. Maybe you can explain that to everyone who's watching. And then among these types are those some that you can actually hand dye at a much larger scale, a bit more consistency, and then some which is like just not going to be as easy.
Yeah, there are some brands that do hand-dyed yarns on a large scale, and that are sustainable. Like they have sustained the business for quite a while, and so their hand-dyed yarns are pretty consistent with what they produce. So in terms of the types of hand-dyed yarns, we see the most common one or the simplest to understand is solid. So I choose a particular color that I really want that is maybe not available in commercial yarns, and I want just that color. So I mix the dye to the particular color that I want, and I just put the dye in, put the yarn in, and I make sure I swirl it around until it's completely even, right? As even as you can make it, and that is what you get, like a solid, or so what we term a solid.
Is it a bit like commercial solid yarns?
Not quite the same, because you are not doing a very mechanical process of I dip 10 times every time I do this, unless you do that, right? So you are still having some elements of uncertainty.
Okay.
So unless
I guess less so compared to other hand-dyed
so
yarns.
there are less variations in where the colors land because you are dipping the yarn into the dye bath completely immersed. So usually we would use more water with this, right? So that it covers all the yarn and there's less spots where you have the yarn exposed and not quite dipped into the yarn.
So that will be the closest to commercial. The category of hand-dyed yarns that are the closest to commercial.
in some,
Okay.
in some,
I mean,
some
if we
extent,
see it as a spectrum, that will be the closest to mimic commercial.
yeah, correct. This
Okay.
is mostly where you want a certain color and you can't get it in commercial yarns, because commercial yarns, they might give you 20 colors to choose from. or
They might
40.
choose more popular colors.
Yeah.
So I guess
So if you
least popular colors, you may need a hand dyer. Okay.
Okay, so you can get a hand dyer to help you specifically dye up a match.
So let's say if I have a knitted top that's very old, for example, and I need the yarn, I need to patch it, right? I need to fix a problem with it. And then I need a specific yarn color to match it. Then that's where something like this will work. I can go to a hand dyer and say, actually I need you to match specific to a yarn that I
So
use.
if the hand dyer is very good with colors, she can tweak until she gets a particular
Alright.
color.
Then what's the next
Then
category
you like
closest?
semi-solids. So semi-solids, not so much multi-colors. It could be just one color, but you have different hues, different tones of the same color, and it is not so even. So like just now when I say the solid, right, you can dip the whole thing in and you swirl it around and make sure the dye is distributed as evenly as you can manage on the whole skein. Semi-solid would be like, you take less care. So when you dip in, you take out, or you
So you're shading lah.
yeah, so there'll be some parts that are darker, some parts that are lighter. So
But it's the same dye bath.
it's the same dye bar. So when you use the yarn, you would see a variation in the intensity of the color. There'll be some parts where the yarn is more intense, the saturation is higher. Some parts where it's less.
So how does this differ from tonals? Or are they the same thing? They're like the same
They
thing?
are similar, but tonals can be more contrasting. Like you purposely leave out spots where you don't pour the yarn, the dye over the yarn.
So it's more like one is like completely immersed and
One
the
is
other one is pouring?
yeah.
Okay.
So that you can get more contrast.
So I should ask this question now. So like this particular skein, I see that there is dark browns and there's also lighter browns or reddish brown.
Yeah.
So is this tonal or is this
I would-
semi-solid?
I would consider this tonal simply because
This is like reddish. It's
there
not the
is
same brown.
yeah, there is some
So it may not be
more
the same
than one
bath.
color. Yeah. It
Okay,
can be more than
okay.
one color.
Alright. So that's semi-solid tonal. So this is like the next in between. Okay, so then what's next?
Then you will have your variegated. Variegated sometimes is more like multicolors. Yeah. So
this one.
yeah. So like this is for sure variegated. You have a variety of colors on the same skein and you have them in certain spots. So when you actually knit them up or weave them up,
So this is another variegated, I suppose. Yeah. Okay. Alright. Useful to sit around the yarn wall today. Okay, then
then of course other than variegation, there are different ways to variegate colors, right? So there are some ways where you put in colors, multiple colors by color patches or color zones, but you can also add in speckles of dry dye so that you get speckles on the
So
yarn
this is
itself.
speckled.
This is speckled.
okay, so this
So
is
this is
because of here,
variegation
the
with
dotted.
speckles.
Okay, variegation is speckles.
Yeah.
So let's check. So this is solid. Okay, so this is solid. You see that the whole thing is like almost largely one color. This is part called kitties. So yes.
So this would be what I consider tonal because you have higher contrast
Okay.
of the colors.
So let's
I
see.
think a lot of the tutorial ones are considered semi-solid.
Okay.
Because they are not quite solid. When you actually use them, you see very fine, subtle changes
Okay.
in color. And then of course something like this is speckled because you can see
With variegation?
Yeah.
Okay. So usually speckle will have variegation. No, well,
Depends
no,
on the
not
yarn.
really. I think my yarn story co has speckle, where it's just like the solid base and then she just speckles it.
So
Okay.
the speckling is more an effect of the yarn to see that you are not having a whole patch of one color, but the color appears as dots when you use the yarn.
Okay. Then
But-
what are other types other than that?
Other types actually mostly depend on not so much a category, it's more to do with the style of the dye, the hand dye,
Okay.
right? So some hand dyers do micro striping, which is very clear cut. They have the loop of yarn, the big loop, and then they say, okay, so if I want to micro stripe two colors, and I want a certain length, then it might be half of it will be having one dye color, the other half will be having another dye color. So when you actually use the yarn as you are knitting or doing your crochet, right, the colors cycle.
So if we were to see it in a hang form, I suppose you would see one twist is one color, and then the other twist.
So this would give you micro striping because the three colors.
Oh, so it's variegated. It can be variegated and micro striping.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So variegated just means multiple colors.
Correct.
Whereas you can have random variation, or you can have
More
micro
regular.
striping.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because when it is more regular, it means like if you were to do like a sock project, for instance, the color comes back. So it comes back in a fairly
predictable way.
more predictable way because you put the colors in a specific zone, right? So it's a specific length of the yarn with that particular color.
Okay.
So when it comes back, let's say you're knitting a sock, it is very obvious that this is how much color there is, this is how much color there is. So in this example, you see there's more of the white or cream background, and then there's less of the red.
So this is, let's try. This is variegated with speckles because I see dots, and to some extent, some amount of striping. Do we always see striping? Do we only see striping in micro striping dye versions, or actually all hand dyed yarns to some extent?
To some extent, there is striping, but it depends on how the hand dyer lays the color. Because some striping, like this one, is quite regular, right?
Okay.
But it is only very visible because we are knitting a sock where it's a small circular tube. So the yarn cycles back more obviously. If you are looking at a top,
Okay.
right, where you are looking
We should
at,
say this was Paco Kitties. This is my yarn story code because I knitted this.
so if you're looking at this, you can also see some kind of striping, but it's not as obvious because this one appears a little bit more sporadic and random because the cycle is regular.
So I guess if you really want the striping effect to show up, you should do stuff like sleeves or socks.
It is more obvious.
Okay.
Because your loop, unless you're looking at the extra long loop, like the extra long skein, right? One skein is maybe about 1 yard to 1.5 yards loop. So the cycle would repeat itself, in a predictable way.
So then I think this is where people get a bit worried when using hand dyed yarn, because I mean very few people want to wear straps on it, right? And a lot of times when you knit. I mean, it's a choice between shawls and scarves, socks. I think socks, scarf, shawls, people are less concerned about striping effect, right? I think it's when it comes to tops that people are a bit more worried about striping effect. So what are some things we should take note of when choosing like hand dyed, like the different types of hand dyed?
So it depends on the pattern. Okay, right? It really depends on the pattern, and it depends on what kind of effect you want to achieve with the pattern. So example, this top that I'm wearing today, okay, I have got color work here, right? So this grey portion is color work. I chose to do this in a solid color, but I could use a variegated yarn, okay, for instance, a multicolored variegated yarn to do the color work. So then it would go from one color to another color to another color as I am knitting. So I actually get to see a gradation of colors in the color work.
But when you see the color work, motifs will not be as obvious, because like let's say I try this, right? It may be white here and then orange.
If I were to use the same white base and I use a variegated, it is obvious and it's a very interesting effect. Some people call
even if I use this, like
you will
because
still
some
see
part of this white will be almost the same. As
so
the
you
white.
want a contrasting?
So okay, so I can do something like this. I choose a solid,
a more
background,
solid base,
and then my contrast color, I purposely choose maybe a hand dyed that doesn't have white lah.
Yeah.
So you're saying,
so
okay,
if I were to do this, for instance, this one has blues and purples, and I put against the white, it would be obvious.
Can I do the opposite? I use this for the main color, and then the contrast I use solid.
So something like this, where there's no very obvious zone or patch of color, right? The striping is very minimal. Yeah. So it's not a very obvious one strip of color. You're not going to get that effect, which is why something like this works very well for wearables.
Okay. So just in case, I'm not really sure the camera picks it up, but actually the collar is made from a speckle. But the speckles are actually quite close to the base color, I would say, which is the darker bluish grey, right? And then there's actually green and purple speckles here. And what I've done when I chose the yarn for my main work is that I've chosen those that also had the almost the same kind of colors. I guess this one doesn't quite have speckles as much as just variegation, striping.
Yeah.
But I picked from the purples and the blues to pick this. So that's why they kind of look like they go together.
Yeah.
So I guess the thing is, when do we choose hand dye? Since we're talking about colors.
There's no right or wrong to the choices.
I mean, it's more expensive,
Yeah.
you know. So I need to know like when is a better time to choose it.
Generally, we see a lot more use of hand dye in wearables, right? Whether it is something next to skin, okay, or something you would want to lay as an accessory. So there are some people who are worried about the cost of hand dyed yarns because compared to your commercial yarns, obviously the cost is significantly higher. So if you're not thinking that you have the budget for it, then you can choose to do small accessories for it. Say a scarf like this. We wove this on the loom and it took one skein.
Yeah.
And this is a scarf that would last for a while, a good while, because number one, we use it every year, right? We use it when we need to, probably when we're traveling, right? But this would last a good while. And this, if you look at it, you can see
a speckled hand dye.
Yeah. So
you variegation.
Trying
to apply my knowledge.
So you have all this color variation. So you are not even looking at having to do a complex pattern. Like for some people who say, oh, if I don't do a complex pattern, then my project is very plain.
Yeah, people who use rigid header looms, they're always worried that can only use plain weave.
Yeah,
I mean, plain weave is the easiest.
But when you do something very plain with a beautiful yarn, the effect is gorgeous. You don't have to do much.
Maybe we can highlight this part. It's a bit like a plaid because there's a crisscross effect. This section that I'm holding up here. Like I guess the speckle or the striping is causing it to have
the crisscross kind of.
Yeah, but it's also not checkered. It's not like the very regular checkered.
I can show you one example of a commercial yarn
that
would give you a more checkered look. This one.
Yeah, woven in the same manner, right? Yes. Yeah. So they're both variegated yarns.
So the color changes are very regular and expected. You know that if you are going to do this repeatedly, let's say I get another ball of this yarn and I put it on the loom, I know exactly how this will turn out because this is exactly how it will show. Because commercial yarns, the
predictability is high.
The length of yarn that is a particular color as it rotates through the colors is expected. So there are some
machine control.
It's machine, yeah. So when they say, okay, we want the brown to be 20 meters, then you fade into the cream for 10 meters, and then you fade into the pink for another 40 meters. Every ball of yarn will look exactly the same. It's in the same cycle, same order. So no matter what brand it is, it's kind of predictable.
So like that, in that case, then would it, I mean, I guess one thing is, does it mean that we should only use hand dyed yarn for small projects since there's no predictability, and then we use commercial yarns for bigger projects like tops?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Because for some, if you did not buy the yarn with the project in mind, right, and you just buy because you like the yarn, then there are times when you run into the difficulty if you have only hand dyed yarns to work with. Because let's say you buy 2 skeins because you really love it, but then you decided
not enough.
You decided to do a bobble sweater that requires 4 skeins. Then what are you going to do? Do half a sweater.
Crop top.
Yeah. So then with commercial yarns, there are of course advantages, right? Because even if it's a different dye lot, you might be able to find something similar, close in another brand, for instance. But with hand dyers, if I want this particular hand dyer's work, and this hand dyer, let's say, is no longer making this yarn, unless you're able to get a custom order, it's very difficult to find another hand dyer who does the same thing that you want,
same style,
because everybody has different preferences for where they place the yarn, the dye colors. And that's why when you say, oh, you prefer this hand dyer's work to this other hand dyer's work, there's a reason for it, because to some extent, the way they put the colors shows, it's like art.
It's like a painter.
They show you that style.
Some painters more than other painters.
Yeah.
You know, all painters are equal, but some are more equal than others. So I guess it goes back to when you buy hand dyed yarn, I guess to some extent you see it as appreciating somebody's piece of art, the personality of the hand dyer.
And it's not so much of, in order to make good work, you must use hand dyed. Rather, it's a case of you see the hand dyed, you love the way the colors interplay.
Identify with it.
Yeah, and you go, okay, I would like a shawl like this. I would like a top in this. I would like a beanie in this.
Okay.
And then it's easier to say, okay, because I can envision something in this, I buy a certain quantity. Maybe I can only afford one skein now, I buy that one skein. And I think of a project that I can fully use that one skein.
Okay. So let's say if we buy multiple skeins. So when this is one of the first few tops I ever made with one of the first few yarns. I bought this at my yarn stories course pop up at Esplanade. This is in 2019. 18 or 28, 19, early 2019.
May,
yeah, about May.
19, yeah.
And then I bought two just because I like the color. Okay, then of course I needed to do a top. And it wasn't enough to do the collar part of it because I think it was 2 and a bit. So then I had to find another bit. And the interesting thing is this top and this collar and this is not even the same base because I think this is a singles and this is a standard merino nylon blend. And so I just did this as per, and I didn't even learn about this thing about alternating hand-dyed yarns. So maybe you should explain to everybody what we mean by alternating.
So when you have 2 skeins of yarn.
Yeah, so the body is 2 skeins. Huh? Okay, so the body is 2 skeins. This has no alternation.
So assuming I buy 2 skeins of yarn like this, right? They look
same
similar.
color,
Yeah,
same colorway.
Because it's the same colorway. It has got the same orange, it's the same gold and yellow, it's got the same cream. But when I unwound this entire thing, I would find that the colors are distributed slightly differently sometimes.
Some variation,
right? Because the most intense portion on one could be elongated. The most intense portion on one could be on a diagonal.
Okay.
Right? So which means when
because
you
of
use
where
it,
the yarn plays during the dyeing process.
when you pour the dye. So which means if I were to use it separately, one after the other, I might get a striping effect that looks something.
Actually, yeah.
And this one would look different.
Because the top, you see that the stripe, the parts that pop up, the colors are more obvious. And then actually at the bottom,
This one is more faded.
it's less obvious.
Yeah.
And this is actually more purple than blue. And then on top is more blue.
Yeah.
But thankfully, I was really lucky. There isn't a very obvious top half, bottom half. Yeah.
There's no distinct line.
Yes.
Right? So it doesn't bother most people.
Okay.
But if it is something that would bother you, right? If you I don't like how I can tell this is where I end one skein and then this is where I start the new one. If that is something that bothers you, then you would want to alternate the skeins.
To be fair, I think that would have bothered me. But like I said, I really lucked out with this set of yarns because it didn't really matter. But the next time I use the hand-dyed yarn, which is right next to you at this point, that shirt, you can maybe haul it over. This is when I did alternate. So on the camera, I mean, it's harder to tell that actually there are some differences. But actually, if you look quite closely, you can tell there's one row of a lighter, one row of a darker. Right?
One of them, the base is lighter, the other base is darker. But because you alternate, right? So it looks deliberate. It looks as if it's meant to be.
Yeah, like mathematical error. You average it big enough, right, over a large enough average, right?
Yeah.
And the error is just slight.
So what we mean by alternating is if you are knitting this in a flat, you will alternate usually every 2 rows. If you are knitting this in a round, then you can alternate every row. The reason why in a flat every 2 rows is because you go left, you go right, you come back, right? So then that's 2 rows.
You don't cut the yarns up.
Yeah,
you just join and carry on.
So you just carry the yarn up the next row, right? So this you can do alternating so that you don't see as much difference in the yarn. Yeah.
Sorry, I need to read my questions because yes, the screenshot off. But you just now earlier on you were saying that when you are doing next to skein projects, you use hand-dyed yarn. So does it mean that hand-dyed yarns are softer, better quality? And why would they be softer or better quality?
The thing is, if you are looking at hand dyers, most hand dyers would choose quality yarn bases.
Okay.
Part of it is also the dye process. Part of it is also because you wouldn't spend so much effort doing something and then to put it on a not so good base. Okay? The reason why I say dye process, number one, if you're looking to dye things like nylon, polyester, acrylic, the chemistry part of it doesn't support dyeing after the yarn is made. You have to dye the fiber as the fiber is being created. So that's why commercial yarns, they can reproduce the same acrylic yarn over and over again in the same color because the same formulation is used. When I create the yarn, I create the color.
Oh, so you mean the color is kind of like made at the same time as the yarn chain? Oh, I always thought they were made first.
You can dye it, but usually they wouldn't.
Why bother, right?
Yeah.
Just merge the two chemistry
You will make
process
the
at one go.
fiber as so you would make the color of the fiber the way it's
See, that's
so
why you need to have a chem teacher on the team. Yes, continue.
yeah. So part of it is the process. Like
Okay.
I can't dye nylon very easily, even if I wanted to, right? So that's one thing. Okay.
So that means okay. So hold there. So you can't dye nylon easily. So when we say we see a merino nylon like the one top side held up, right? Merino nylon base. So it's actually the merino that got dyed, not the
yeah.
nylon.
Because the thing is, when this yarn was made in a, let's say 80-20 kind of blend, right? It is the fibers that were blended. So you don't see streaks of yarn or fiber
Yes,
that's
of course.
undone.
Yeah.
Right? But the actual fibers that took up the acid dye is the merino.
So you would say that as a result, since it's only the 80% that takes up the dye, so if I went to a 50-50, 50% merino, 50% nylon, the color, even though I
The
stuck
take-up
them
is
into the
different.
same bulk,
Yeah,
they
the
will look
take-up is
different.
different.
Okay.
So when you, let's say you go to a hand dyer's website where you see, oh, I've got 80-20, I've got 75-25, I've got all these different bases, right? When it is the same colorway, the colors look different. And part of the reason is because the fibers soak up the dye, they take up the dye differently. So when you have tensile added, this looks different. When you have silk added, this looks different. So that's part and parcel of why the same color, they can tell you, oh, I ordered this color.
Yes, we have some
Right, but
difference.
it will look different.
Let's see. We have deep sea. Oh, but I don't know if it's close enough to tell. This is bamboo. Okay.
So you can tell a slight difference in the way the yarns appear. This one is slightly deeper. This one is
I
slightly.
think this is more obvious. Because this is silk, merino silk, and this is nylon. And this is actually brighter because this is 80% merino. This is only 50% merino mixed with silk. And I guess
So-
silk also absorbs the dye
differently.
Yeah. So I guess this is why sometimes when people come in to buy, we try to tell you all to get the same base. Or if you really want an 80-20, you could potentially mix it with a 75-25. I guess it's close enough
So,
to make that jump. Yeah. So okay, number one, you would typically pick something with a merino, some element of it. So I guess in Singapore, merino, because merino is a more popular.
Merino
wool
is
choice.
it's more known to us. Like if you were to ask about sheep breeds and wool types, merino is one that a lot of people will be able to tell you, even if they don't craft, even if they don't knit or crochet, because brands like Uniqlo will tell you, oh, we have merino.
It's good quality.
Yeah, merino cardigan, merino top, merino sweater,
So it's
right?
common.
So it's common. And if you go to places like Australia, New Zealand, where they grow sheep, right? You visit a sheep farm, they'll tell you we grow merino because merino sells very well. It has
Internationally.
yes, so it has got a reputation for being soft, for being not irritating, not scratchy.
Not scratchy,
It
yes.
feels really good, right? So therefore, merino is well known. But if you were to ask people from a different location, people
whole wharf. A lot of people use whole wharf,
whole wharf,
BFL.
BFL, and then you have Corriedale. So there's ramble. So there's so many
Okay.
different breeds of sheep that we don't know, right? So it's more because of that.
Exposure.
Yeah.
Exposure.
So when you see some hand dyers, sometimes they put down pole walls, sometimes they put up BFL. We have customers ask, what is this?
Just another sheep.
Is it still wool? Is it?
It's like a different race
Yeah.
altogether. Alright. Yeah. Okay. So would you also say that it also feels softer because I guess when you hand dye, I guess the washing process, I mean hand wash. I suppose hand dyer when they dye, they do by hand, right? So they wash by hand versus like machine commercially dye is processed through a machine. So is that also part of the reason why the yarn feels softer?
Yes and no. So dyeing is very much temperature controlled, right? So while the optimum temperature is between 60 to 80 degrees Celsius, different hand dyers will have different preferences. Because let's say you use this particular brand.
Hang on, now you say 60 to 70, that's a particular type of dye, like acid.
No,
All
most
dyes.
acid dyes are about between 60 to 80.
Reactive dyes?
Reactive dyes, no temperature specific.
Okay.
So
Yeah, so acid dyes lah when you say this temperature range.
right, it's acid dye. So let's say you like this particular brand's blue color, right? But when you put it at 80 degrees, it shows a little bit more green.
Okay.
You put it at 60 degrees, it's a little bit more purple.
Mm.
So to this hand dyer, maybe the optimum for that particular
The look that
the
you
look
like,
that they want is 70 degrees Celsius. So then
we all got preference.
so you control by temperature.
Mm.
You also control by sometimes sequence, because
What color hit first?
yes, because the color that hits first sometimes can separate. So there are dyes that can separate out because they are not single color dye. So it can be quite complex.
They're not like primary colors and primary.
Our
hue and
idea of
primary-
so our idea of primary colors could be that so when we look at primary colors, let's say watercolor, we say, oh, this is the primary color. So this blue I can mix with yellow to get all kinds of green, right? So that's the idea of primary color. But with dyes, sometimes it's slightly different. So like this particular blue, you can have 10 blues, but maybe out of these 10 blues, only 2 are considered
True
single dyes, meaning they only have a single pigment, only one single compound to form that blue color. The others are mixes of different compounds. So this one could contain 2 blues to make this one. So when you put this
The
mix,
two blues
the
separate.
2 blues, they can separate. So which means sometimes
So like chromatography lah. Those of you
yes.
who remember doing chromatography in secondary school.
Sec 1 science.
You know, you draw the marker and then you put the paper filter on the paper filter. Then you stick it in water and then you see the color
The color
separate.
separate.
So basically, that's what the dye does in water lah. Okay. I think if we give the example, maybe more people can relate.
Yeah. So because some dyes, especially things like black, for instance, they usually consist
they are
of
never really black.
yeah, they're never really black. Which means when you see a lot of black speckles, right? Usually the black speckles, very interesting. They would have sometimes brown speckles, orange speckles, blue or green speckles right next to the black speckles. Because when it hits the water, some of the black speckles will separate. Some of them will just stay.
Hit. Okay.
So you get a lot of fun playing with dyes.
Okay. So I guess is that partly also the reason why hand-dyed yarns are so expensive, because they use better quality yarns.
Yeah.
Any other reason that it's so expensive?
It's very labor intensive. Yeah. I have been asked, why don't I dye yarns for sale? I'm thinking, not that I'm not interested.
But there's the process of soaking the yarn,
There's a
dyeing
lot,
it, washing
not
it.
just that. If I want to do it as a business, I want to be able to keep
Replicate
it going. I need to be very good about keeping records, because if my customer wants a particular colorway, I need to be able to reproduce it.
And that's the challenge for both of us.
Yeah.
We are not very good at
Keeping records, because keeping record means sometimes it takes the fun out of the job.
Yes.
Because when I dye yarns for my own use, I just
You just
play.
go with the
yeah,
feel.
I play with colors and I end up with something that I think I'm happy with, and it
may
happens-
never happen again.
it probably won't happen again. Like the other day when I looked at the samples, one customer asked, "Hey, can you do this?" I say, "I'm not sure I can reproduce this." Yeah.
In case you all do not, it's hard for you to understand why hand dyeing requires so much effort. We do have a hand dyer here, Louise from Papa Kitties. She does run classes here, Introduction to Hand Dyeing. And I would say, of all the times that she's run a class, 90% of the participants go away from the class thinking, you know what, we'll just buy the yarn.
Yes.
Too much effort to that.
Because the whole process is not difficult. To be fair, it's not a complicated process. You don't have to worry.
Prep lah,
Yeah.
before
So
and after.
you don't have to worry to say that hand dyeing is difficult. It's not difficult. It's not complex. But it is as complex and as complicated as you want it to be. So for instance, if you're trying to match a color, say I looked at a photo and I love this beach photo. So I want the color of the sea blue, and you want to match it, but you can't find it in commercial dye, which means you have to be the one to mix the dye,
And
test
in
it.
solution form,
Yeah.
it may not look the same as in
It's
the
completely
yarn.
different.
Yeah.
So you look at a solution form, you think this is the color. You put the yarn in, it comes out different color. So you mix some more because this one a bit more blue. So you put in some more things, mix it. Oh, now it's a bit more green. So you have to go over and over to work out what you want.
And that's assuming you want an exact color. Let's say you like chinchai, like me, any color is okay. The problem is before dyeing the yarn, you need to soak the yarn first. Then you need to get the dye bath to the correct temperature. Then you need to dye the yarn. You need to wait for the yarn to take. Then you need the dye to take. Then you need to wash the thing gently.
Now, fix the
Then
dye
you-
first.
Yeah, fix the dye. Then after that, you need to wash the yarn gently to wash out the excess. Then you can wait for it to dry. Then you can use it. So yeah, so that's why we say it's not easy, even if you are very laissez-faire about the color that you
Yeah,
get.
because
Yeah.
temperature control is important. A lot of hand dyers who start out trying out colors, trying out the temperature that works for them, right? Because wool is something that can
With
felt.
felts, yeah.
You agitate it, and then
It
the fibers cling to each other.
Good luck to you.
Then you can't use it properly already. So temperature control is one thing. And because you are new, right, you want to fidget, fiddle.
Yeah,
Then you are
uncertain.
felting the yarn as you are stirring and heating. And if you don't take care, you boil the water,
You cook your yarn?
and or you put it in the microwave like what some people do, you burn your yarn. You
So,
can actually
so I
scorch
guess we should say that when it's expensive, you're really paying for the hand dyers' expertise, their time, and most importantly, the care that they take with the fiber, because it does require them to be quite careful.
And if they are selling it as a product, they stand behind the product. They have to, because this is their creation, right? So
It's like you don't expect painters to sell their art for really cheap.
So they would have done their experimentation, their failures, the amount of yarn that they have destroyed as they are mastering their craft.
you do not know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, if you're interested, we just run classes here. And for those of you who do already know how to work with acid dyes, we also have a dye studio pass. Because yes, we understand the challenges about having a separate set of equipment for dyeing, because you actually need to have a separate set of apparatus for it so that you don't mix it with your standard kitchen apparatus. We do have a dye studio pass that you can come in, we have the setup, you just come and dye. All we ask is that you keep it clean, pack up when you go.
So you need to bring your yarn blanks on your dye mask. Okay,
And then we provide acid dye only.
acid dyes.
Because it's the most straightforward one. Yeah. Okay, so then the next thing is it because they're expensive, that's why they are so many hanks, or there's another reason why? Oh, and just in case you didn't know, this is called a hank. Yeah. In this twisted form. Is there a reason why this twisted form and no other form?
Well, when the hand dyers do their work,
It's in a loop.
it's in a loop. Or rather, most hand dyers work in a loop. Nowadays, they are got cake. Some hand dyers do by
Blank.
winding on the sock blank, right? And there are some hand dyers that do their personal gradient or personal microstriping using other methods. Where they wind their yarn on a rack where- differently. So that one requires a lot more work.
They also got the hand dyers to wind them in warps to go on loops.
Yeah.
Yes.
Those are a lot more work, right? So you have different types. But overall, most hand dyers work in a big loop that you see. So if you were to unravel this, it would be a big
So it's a
loop.
convenience thing.
Yeah. And also because in a commercial yarn, when they wind it is for everybody's convenience. I buy, I take, I use, right? I don't have to wind it separately, right? And most commercial yarns, if they are wound already in the cake, you would find them wound typically not very tight. Like if you find
Easy
them,
to fall apart.
if you find them in this kind of donut form, right, I really don't like using commercial yarns in a donut form. I will rewind it because they fall apart very easily. But there's a good reason why they are wound in this way. Why people would sell yarn like this, even
It's
though
a bit fragile, like you touch, you will mess up.
yeah, but it's because they don't stretch the yarn excessively.
Because they have the right equipment to do it.
Yeah, so when they wind the yarn, they wind it such that they're not pulling the yarn and stretching the yarn. So the yarn inside the donut and the yarn outside the donut is not, it's at the same tension. You're not stretching it. But if you were to wind this, whether by hand or using your yarn winder, right, as you're winding it, because of tensioning, the yarn on the inside is a lot more relaxed. The yarn on the outside tends to be a bit more stretched. And so if you're not using it immediately, even people who buy from us will just say, bring it home like that. If you want to use it,
Come back to us.
come back to us. We'll wind for you. That one no issue. But
You may need to wait
Yeah.
because when you come back, we may not be free.
yeah, but it's not usually suggested that
You
you
wind it up,
put it for 2 years, and then you start using it.
Okay.
Yeah, because
I do have 2 cakes of sweet Georgian and I should really use it.
Because for some yarns, or rather some fibers, to be fair, not all fibers do that, right? But for some fibers, the stretching can be quite significant. So then the outside yarns become stretched thinner, and then the inside yarns still fat and plump. Then when you are
Like
doing
rubber
your
band.
project, you'll be like, something doesn't look quite right. If it is a yarn that can be bouncy,
It can recover
yeah,
from the stretch.
you can recover from the stretch. But your knitted project would look very odd. Because when you are knitting at the stretched form. Then when it bounces back, the tension would be different. So we usually would suggest don't do that.
So either I have to use up the 2 cakes that I have at home, or I should put them back into the egg box.
Yes.
Okay. then we'll have to bring them to the office to get one thing. So the next question is actually, are all hand-dyed yarns equal? If I buy one hand-dyed yarn, okay, I know some of you will ask because we have a range of yarns here. We do have some that are slightly more affordable than others. Some straightforward, I can tell why more expensive. Like the Sweet Georgia Sea Silk Lace is clearly the most expensive because it's sea cell and silk versus the others which tend to have a wool base. But then again, we also have Sweet Georgia's Tough Love Sock, which is, let me read off this label, just merino wool. And so the question is, why is it significantly more than
Well,
local
at the
hand-dyed yarns?
end of the day, what hand dyers tag on their product is what they perceive the product to be valued at, right? We don't have a way to determine that say, oh, from this hand dyer, this is how it should be priced. From this brand, this is how it should
So
be
I guess
priced.
they price based on the amount of investment and time that has gone into developing this product.
And also what the base cost them. If you have come across enough hand-dyed yarns, you would know that one hand dyer's 80-20 is different from another hand dyer's 80-20. They might have the same label that says this is 80%
But
merino.
milled at different locations.
Yeah, when it's milled at different locations, you have different content because some merino could be at 21 microns, which is fine, right? And then you have some that
18
uses
microns.
18 microns, and so that is super fine. So you also have merino that's 27 microns, which is
Okay.
the same as a bit coarser wool.
Yeah.
So all this information may not be on the label. So you may
yes,
not.
yes. I mean,
you
it's
can't-
too much information.
Yeah, that thing will look like a certificate.
Not just
right?
that, nobody understands.
So you will have hand dyers with similar kind of yarn. Like, oh, hand dyer A uses this, hand dyer B uses this, but they can be from very different mills,
Okay.
very different sources, and some may have the organic, the term organic tag.
Yeah.
And then of course that adds another layer of cost.
So I guess it's not equal, even though the label says they're both 75-25. It's not necessarily equal because number one, you're paying for. It's like going to buy a painting lah. I mean, we can all paint the same thing, but it could be a bit different.
Not just that, even merino. Merino is a natural product. You can understand that, oh, farm A has got this
Yes,
quality,
yes.
farm B has another quality. Even nylon. What we understand nylon.
Oh yes, we had this. We should give some context. We had this conversation because I once asked Wei Lian, is an acrylic, nylon, microfiber? Aren't they just all different types of plastic? So what exactly?
There are different types of plastic, but nylon is a name that's associated with what most people think is one fiber. But actually nylon is a name for a group of fibers. So when you say nylon,
When you
there's-
say nylon, you may think of this. When I say
Yeah.
nylon, it may be that.
yeah, but nylon actually consists of
A lot.
a lot of things.
So even your 25% nylon can be like 20, like few thousand
it can be
variation.
it can be
nylon.
20% of this nylon or 20% of this nylon. They actually behave differently because although they belong to the class of nylon, they are not the same.
So actually, yarns got a lot of knowledge to use it.
You can be as geeky about it and find out as much as you can and say that you want to find out more about the yarn, so you ask the hand dyer, say, hey, what mill did your base come from? Can I find out more about what micron is your merino?
But your hand dyers may also not know what.
Yeah. So some hand dyers would actually find out because
Okay.
they are interested.
Maybe because they
Right.
want consistency. So they don't want batch to batch their nylon.
Yeah, and because
their merino nylon.
some suppliers are very open and say that this is what we supply, this is what our product says. But if some suppliers are a bit sketchy over what they offer as information, then maybe their supply itself is not as stable.
I think we had this experience before with Sweet Georgia. I think they did have a base that they were using for a while, and then they had to suspend sales for a while because I think the original mill that they bought from was no longer able to supply, and they had to search. So during COVID, and then they had to search for another supplier, and there was there was like a duration where they didn't sell that base because they were really trying very hard to find a mill that could give them something
Of the same quality.
as similar as what they had, because I guess it influenced their dye process, right? So they also want to maintain certain consistency. So I think that's where some of the pricing difference happens, because for a brand like Sweet Georgia, then a certain level of consistency is expected of them, and they have to strive to meet those standards. And of course, locally hand-dyed yarns and hand-dyed yarns that we bring in from overseas also have a price difference because one has to take the plane.
Yes.
I mean, they all have to take the plane to go from the supplier to the dye
But when
location.
we ship in finished products,
Yes, there's another plane to
the amount that we have to tag on to it is a lot more significant than
take. And I think most hand-dyers are also they're small production, so they also cannot buy their blanks, right, at big volumes like your commercial dyers.
it's a lot to take on. I mean, if you were to look at what they are pricing it, so if their cost is say just half, if you were to just make things simple, just half of what they sell it for, they would have to take in at least a 10 kilogram order every time they order.
Yeah.
That's minimum.
And 10 kilograms of yarn can
And that's
take a while to dye.
Yeah, that's
and
100
take a while to sell. Yeah. So I think we understand that not everybody has the budget for hand-dyed yarns. So we also don't expect that people just come in, and drop a pound plenty to just buy
And
the hand-dyed
not
yarns.
every project
Requires
requires hand-dyed yarns. In the sense that, of course, if you have the money to spend, go ahead. But some things that requires frequent washing and care, for
Maybe
instance,
not.
I wouldn't recommend hand-dyed yarns simply because
It's hard to take care
it's
of.
hard to take care of. So if it's something I want to throw in the washing machine, I
Commercial yarns.
wouldn't use hand-dyed yarns.
And I guess it's also if you're making gifts for people, I would only choose hand-dyed yarn if I know the recipient is the type who will take care of it.
Yeah, or who will take my advice on how to take care of things. Like if this person says, nah, all I want to do is throw in a washing machine.
Yes, me.
Yeah, then you'll be like, okay,
So
I will take note of this.
Yeah, if any of you are gonna make stuff for me, just know that I'm really lazy when it comes to laundry. I prefer easy care, no ironing, washing machine, gentle wash is fine. So please don't give me anything that requires a lot of care.
Hand wash only.
I did walk out of this clothing shop. I walked in and the sales staff came up to me and said, "Oh, I'm sure you like our clothes here. Everything here has to be hand washed and steam ironed." I looked at her. I was like,
Thank you.
"Thanks." I turned around and walked straight out of the shop because I refuse hand wash.
I mean, I would do hand wash for my knitted tops.
Yes. But
That's
every
about it.
day to day wear, no. Yeah. So yes. So I guess that's some consideration, right, for everybody to think about. I think what you want to do is you either buy it, like you appreciate art, you buy it for the color, but maybe you don't buy like a lot. You just buy one so that you get a chance to really appreciate the work. It's like showing your vote of confidence for the person who has dyed the person or the persons who dyed the yarn. Another one is if this is a really unique gift for someone and you do what you want to spend a lot of care in choosing what you would like to put into the present. I think that's what we always talk about when it comes to crafting. It's about the meaning and the driving force behind it, the 意思 behind it, right? That's why we're called 手地方, right? And if there is that value to it, to putting in that time to do it, then you celebrate it in that manner.
Because there are also people who use hand-dyed yarns not necessarily for gifting, or they don't buy it specifically for gifting, but because they enjoy the texture, they enjoy the feel of it, they enjoy working with it. So that is another way you can enjoy it. Like as you are making, you really love the texture and feel, and you go.
Especially if you do your projects very slowly. Then you can touch.
Yeah. So I personally don't use a lot of hand-dyed yarns. I go through projects too fast. So if I were to do my projects only in hand-dyed yarns, I'll be very broke.
Yeah.
Very.
Yes, she goes through like 2 or 3 projects a month.
Yeah.
It'll be too costly for her. I go through 2 or 3 projects in like a year, so it's okay. And because I spend so long touching my projects, like it takes her like maybe 5 minutes to finish that one row. It might take me like 5 hours to finish. Okay, not 5 hours. That's just an exaggeration. Like 25 minutes or 50 minutes to finish that one row. I want to be able to touch good quality. So that's why a lot of you will hear that I use a lot of hand-dyed yarns. It's not because I have like a ton of budget to blow, but really because the amount that I spend on those hand-dyed yarns, those projects can last me a year.
What she spends on hand-dyed yarns is about what I spend on commercial yarns.
Yeah, but she gets like 10 times the amount of projects that I do, and she completes it in the same amount of time that I do. So that's what it really is. And I think for me also, because my skin is fairly sensitive to like scratchy yarns. So I find that when I work with hand-dyed yarns,
You did like wool before.
yeah, I did until I met hand-dyed yarns. Yeah, so I think that's the reason why I can, because even commercial wools, I'm still a bit hesitant to use them, because I have on occasions where I use them and I can feel like my fingers are so much drier and the sides, the skin start to flake a lot more. Whereas when I use hand-dyed yarns, I don't have that problem. Yeah, so I think that quality, I'm investing in my own care, I guess. Yeah, so that's really why, for me, that's my consideration. So I think different people have different consideration.
Yeah, I'm still working through my accumulated yarn stash, and so I don't buy a lot of hand-dyed yarns. I only have a few skeins. When I say a few skeins, I don't mean a box in storage somewhere at home and here. But yeah, those I reserve for what I deem to be special projects. Yeah.
So we know that hand-dyed yarns can be very appealing to everybody, and we'd like to make it like Hui Lin said, we'd like to be able to have your try, but maybe only in a one skein kind of projects. For those of you who would like to do a one skein local hand-dyed yarn project, actually our Weave a Scarf workshop does exactly that. So you know that green scarf, right? Regularly we run this project. You just come, you use the loom, you weave a scarf, one skein, and you get this brilliant scarf. You get to choose. Now we do allow you to choose the colorway. A couple of days before your workshop, we will drop you a WhatsApp with the selection. I mean, we can't tell you what colors we get. I mean, Louise surprises us as much as we are. She surprises the rest of you. So we will text you the pictures, and then you pick, and then you get one scarf. Louise also does
so the
knitting.
sock knitting class is a 3-session workshop, and with the workshop you will get the
One skein
tools,
of yarn.
one skein of yarn, as
And the
well
tools,
as the tools to learn how to knit a pair of socks.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
So
think one skein, if you knit ankle socks, that means this is like, I think in the class Louise makes you do this size, and I think
no, you can choose how long.
yeah, you can, but usually I think a lot of people do this size. If you do this size, I think one skein gets you one pair. If you do ankle socks, which is about here, actually I've made 2 pairs
Yes.
out of one skein, and I still have leftover. I could make 2 and a half, but nobody makes a half. Oh, maybe I should, so that if I ever lose a sock, I have a spare one. The other thing that we're going to do for Christmas actually is we are going to put because we know the Sweet Georgia hand-dyed yarns are a bit high on the higher side for our local audience because of all the additional cost that comes. We have shortlisted 4 of the DK Sweet Georgia yarns, hand-dyed ones, and we have 4 of them in DK weight, and you have 2 of them in the flaxen silk, so this is linen silk, and then 2 of them that's in the tough love sock, which is 100% merino wool. And what we have done with them is Hui Lian, my friend here, has designed a one skein knitted scarf. And you should hold this up.
This scarf
It's exactly one skein.
is exactly one skein.
Yeah, one skein. So you have a choice. We're going to launch this in probably at the end of October. I mean, everything is here already. So you get to choose one skein. You buy one skein, right? At the price that they retail at. We will give you the pattern, and more importantly, because it's Christmas, remember we said Christmas, we are going to include 1 pair of mindful needles in size 4.5, US size 7, 4.5 mm. And the reason why we chose this particular size, actually let me explain how we got to this entire design. We chose the needles first, 4.5 mm, and we chose them because engraved on the needle for the mindful set is rejoice, the word rejoice. So this is their rejoice mindful knitting needles. So at 4.5, Christmas rejoice, right? Then we chose 4.5, we need DK. So I chose the DK. Then I just threw in the challenge. I want one project in DK, one skein.
So that's how this scarf came about.
And so you will have packed up very nicely in a Christmas gift box. We only have 10, and it's not 10 of each color. Total, we have 10 sets. Okay, and so it will come in a box like this. You can have the option of having your yarn put inside in a skein, in a hang form, equivalent to just that hang form. It's the best way to store the yarn. But if you wanted to use it immediately, we can give it to you in clipped up form, right? The whole idea is you can buy this for yourself, you can buy this for someone else, or you can have someone else buy it for you. So you get one box has one skein and one set of needles.
Yep, and it comes with a pattern that is suitable for beginners. So if you are an experienced knitter who would like to try these hand-dyed yarns and try the new micro needles, you can always choose a different scarf pattern that is a bit more complex or to your liking.
Yes.
And work on that instead.
So we just throw in the design for something simple, and it's something, even if you're experienced or intermediate knitter, you can still do this because it's a fairly easy project. Like, can you imagine a Christmas dinner or whatever, like, Christmas gathering, and you just want to chillax, public holiday. Probably can finish it in a day if you're an experienced knitter, you think?
Yeah. I timed myself when I did this, and it was possible to finish this in about 6 to 8 hours if I was not distracted, like reading or videos and so on.
So I guess you could, if you take the time between Christmas to New Year's Day to do it, you could probably finish it.
Just finish it over the weekend.
Yeah. Or you could buy it at the start of November, which is probably when we'll launch it, and then do it and gift this. Instead of gift the set, gift the scarf to someone. You will just put it back inside the same box that your yarn came in, and then ta-da! You just need to tell us so we don't stick a sticker and tag the box. Yeah. So yes, if you were intending to try this set of needles, they are brilliant, I have to say. The monthly needles are really brilliant. Try the needles and try the hand-dyed yarns. That's a good option. You of course always have the option of buying any of the other hand-dyed yarns that we have in fingering weight. You just don't get the rejoice because you will need a slightly smaller
You could do actually
fingering.
even fingering on 4.5, that would work. It's just
a bit
so this was done on 5.
a bit like looser.
So this is fingering done on 5 mm. What Louis has done is the same. You will just get a really tricky.
But we might not have enough rejoice needles.
But
But we aren't the only people who are selling these needles. Come and talk to us. We'll tell you who else is selling it in this particular island of ours. And so I think that is about it for this month's crafting. Chatting at Crafting. I know some of you have been asking us if we will ever do crafting with Atelier videos. My response to that is Chen Chen's project vlog is not going to be very exciting because Chen Chen does the same project over 3 months. I'm just going to keep showing you the same thing. But Miss Brilliant here goes through projects like, I don't know, drinking water.
Faster lah, just a bit faster.
So, send in your messages to convince her to put her projects because it's her that needs convincing. I am convinced I can show you my project. It just makes for a really boring video. But maybe for her, you can invite her to talk about her projects. Or, if you all have any questions about anything, you can let us know and we can chat about it the next time around. Maybe the next time around we can chat about weaving. I've been answering a lot of questions about what are the different types of looms. Actually, we have a video on the different types of looms that was made during the circuit breaker, but maybe it's time to refresh it. I don't know. We'll have a think. Okay, that's it, everybody. We will see you the next time around. Bye.